I need to prop this puppy up. Alright, hold on. Remember what I say. One by one. All saving the trouble. Then one by one they came and 0 people are still here. Could it be the topic name? Let's see. Okay. Well, I was just chatting with myself here alone, and I figured, let's talk about cults. And I felt like a top hat, a veil, and a wig would start a visual for you. This is, do you guys see these eyeballs here all over this mushroom? It is covered with eyeballs. I do that because I store any evil eye you give me or anyone else into for later. So anyways, let's talk. Let's talk about cults, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about swing dance and all the fun things that we could be. We can't take somebody else's song, self. That's somebody else's song. You can't just change the lyrics. You're not allowed. Whatever. So, I'm waiting to gather my large audience. It looks like there's 2 people. How cool. The first thing I would like to mention that is a common mistake that is shown in movies that a real cult leader wouldn't make who'd been trained and read their books. A very common mistake a lot of cult leaders in movies make, okay, is they they get in there, they take something over, and they try to change it right away. The rules of cult leading go like this. It takes about 250 hours with those people where they show you their bullshit and they feel like you still like them. You still treat them a certain way. They still feel good around you or whatever, okay? Whatever that is, even if you're sadistically making them feel good. I don't know what you're doing, but it takes 250 hours. You can't change anything when you take over a cult, and you're not supposed to try unless it's like in Sun Tzu, Art of War, like you could go to Machiavelli and get the same information I'm giving you, but you get in there, and unless it's absolutely like unless you're willing to give the whole thing up and have it explode if it does, that's like a last ditch like kamikaze thing that could go down either way. It's just kind of like, is it completely kamikaze or quasi kamikaze, right? So like so that means if you meet with most of the people when they go to meeting once a week, usually if you're in a cult, you can't rely on all of them to show up all the time. So if you catch them once a week, you get 55 hours with them in a week. In a year. So you take for 1 year, you don't change a single goddamn thing. You don't move the flowers around or change the color scheme. You don't change the policy. Like, I just watched House of Dragons, and I'm just like this Targaryen princess, and she becomes Queen of Dragons, and the first thing, she's got a new maester. She's making crazy mistakes, and I'm like, chick, you're supposed to be a cult leader. Number one, first, she feels like her people, because she was like in this keep, right? She's this like blonde, white-haired, like goddess queen, dragon riding. We don't believe in goddess queens, but for the sake of the argument, you know what I'm saying? Dragon rider, she's an heir to the throne. Her father names her, but then one of her brothers tries to take the throne through a less legitimate line or whatever from a concubine, and then she like has to take off to this castle far away with her dragons, but nobody could really get her because the dragons are fierce. But like, so she's coming up with plans to take over King's Landing, and while she's out there, something happens and her son ends up dying in this battle before she becomes queen and takes over King's Landing. And so when she gets to King's Landing, someone says to her, what do you want done with your council back at Dragonstone? You know, your faithful council you've had for years, you want to bring them over here, what do you want to do? And she said, well, because of their silence, they're unfit and they didn't do the right thing, so just, I'm done with them. And I was like, oh, holy roller shit. They're just trying to paint her so incompetent. She's blowing it right there. You would never do that. You would just say, you would never say anything that would make them want to defect while they're sitting in your territory. To start handing over secrets and shit. Like, you, all you do is you say, I've been so overwhelmed with grief. Please give me a moment to sit with my advisors and think on this. I'm sure I have all the best interest for them in the world. I've just been so overwhelmed. Of course, I'll get to it very soon. Let me just have a moment and just sit down, and then I will get to you immediately. I'm sure we have something figured out for them that will quite be good, whether it's here or there. And then, so she's not going to make it to where these guys can't find a way to stay with her, right? So then the next thing is, because after she repeats this in front of all these people, rumors are going to spread from Cutlery's, like, wives and shit out there. They're gonna woo, and then the next thing you know, back in the camp at Dragonstone, hey, did you hear that so-and-so, the queen's done with all these people here, she's about to assassinate them or leave them to die, or who knows what's gonna happen. And then somebody else is like, did you tell your boss? And they're like, yeah. And then they're all like crazy, and they're like, well, we better make the first move because it could fall at any time. You know, so shit, that was the first thing. I was like, oh no, don't do that. And then the next thing is she's in the chambers with her maester. Her maester is she just got a new council, and she had invited this new maester to join her council, and the traditional council has this round bowl on the table and a marble for each council position, and the maester went to take the marble for his position, and she said, oh, I'm done with that. Put it back in there. And I was like, oh, holy shit. She didn't go to cult leader class the whole time she was being raised by a king. No, for the first year, you don't change anything. And unless it is like matters of absolute, you're willing to lose the whole mission if you have to on that part. And like, so I'm like, okay. Then they show her saying, take down House Tyrell, which is her half brother's family on the other side, and she's still like her best friend from her youth, her dad's second wife, but take down all their house colors and go burn them. And it's like, that's the next thing. You don't disrespect it. Now if it's a takeover, right? If it's a takeover, I was like, she has a few options. It is a takeover, but are the Tyrells still in good standing? If they're still in good standing, you leave them something out there with everybody else's stuff. If you wanted to do something like sideways, you could hire some women to cut it in strips and make blankets out of it and hand them to the poor. But that's probably not. But you wouldn't just take all that expensive fabric and burn it. And also, you wouldn't just strip all the stuff off. You would leave, unless it was a takeover. Yeah, you're replacing your banners if they were, but they hadn't replaced the Targaryen banners, because the only reason that her brother was on the throne at all is because he was a Targaryen. So that they it's not like they were taking down the lead banner like the American flag. If somebody else put a different flag up, then you took it down, you put it back up. We're not talking a hypothetical like that. We're talking about other stuff in other areas of the castle where different people lived and shit. And that's a different matter altogether. In most cases, you leave it pretty much as it is unless there's something really, really untoward about it for the first year. And then the next thing she does is she goes, what did she do next? It was the next one. She doesn't use social graces when that's all that would suffice with so many people. So it's not that she's rude and horrible to them. It's that there's a lot of people that she runs into in her daily business that they show her having run-ins with where she's not rude to them, but she's kind of terse, right? But on a level that when you see people who look cool cucumbers that are in charge, they don't seem terse unless they're losing it, okay? Unless they're having a meltdown. And so it makes her seem like she's perpetually on the edge of a meltdown. So to fix that, she would have to not appear terse anymore. So she would have to like walk slowly in the room, offer tea, ask the people how they're doing, social niceties. And most people would be like about 66% of people probably, according to the Yale Baby Study, would be won over just by the cookies and crumpets and songs. They'd just be like, woo, that's just fine here. And so, so she has the people, some of the lords and ladies had taken some extra money and goods and hid them and planned to ration them out, but we're not rationing them at the rate that the peasants thought was fair. And so she made them sit down and eat a plate of rats as a surprise, invited them to a feast, acted like it was going to be this wonderful feast, and then gave them plates of burnt rats and had the peasants serve them burnt rats, which is, oh my God, you're trying to cause a complete uproar. And then because the peasants are standing behind these lords and ladies who they fed, who they just served dead rats to, and now they have to eat it. Like, and then while people are searching their houses to take their goods and give them to the poor, and I was like, oh. Okay, you do want I'm not saying you don't want a good reputation with the poor to some extent, but it doesn't take much to put them in awe. And I wouldn't have invited them to a feast and had it and fed them rats. It's not, unless you're planning to burn the kingdom down and you're the Joker, then go for it. If you're the Joker and you want to do the Joker thing, you already have a dragon, you can drive off and blaze the town up on your way out. You don't care about the little earthlings flying out on fire. Then, you go ahead and feed them the rats. It's a great idea. It'll go great for your cult. You'll end up like Jim Jones, okay? That's probably what happened. He probably had a bunch of CIA and military and shit in his like upper echelon and other people from Hollywood and stuff you don't even know about in the background. And then one day he sat them all down and tried to feed them rats, and they were like, okay, fuck it, you're getting the poison, motherfucker. It could have been something like that. He probably tried to feed his upper echelon rats and act like it was just going to be a commonplace thing. There's a interplay between like lords and ladies and the royalty, where like you have to like between whether you're going to have the peasants or the lords and ladies on your side, or what your balance is going to be. I can come up with ideas for that one, but I'm not sure I want to say all of them now. What else? Okay, so the first year you don't change anything. Also, the cult isn't going to be yours until you're 5 years in. And if you think that it's yours before that, you're wrong. Because it takes about 250 hours, and we're going about an hour a week. Plus, people get sick sometimes. You can't expect more than an hour a week membership. Come on now. Let's be realistic here. You're not going to get more than approximately an hour a week. That's 55 hours. That is the minimum amount in studies to form a genuine bond with another person. In that time, you can't change anything, and they're going to show you their weaknesses and their problems and their flaws, and you're going to have to not react with disgust and still interact with them with cookies and crumpets the next day. And at the same time, it wouldn't hurt you to read a few books on pirate ships and learn about how pirate captains had to build up this mystique around themselves. Because if they didn't have it, people would be mutinizing the ship all day long. And so, I don't think that's a word, but it doesn't matter. There would be constant mutinies. And so what would a pirate ship guy, these guys would actually, and whether it was a slave ship captain, a pirate ship captain, they had to create a dynamic around them that was so intense that people would believe that they had supernatural powers or that the devil himself had possessed this man. That's how they had to scare people, because you're on a fucking boat. You get a mutiny, this is not like being on a train where you're dropped off in the desert somewhere. This is the middle of the ocean. Okay? So, that means you can't lose your bearing in front of people. It means that you have to, like, keep lots of parts of your life secret. You can't vent to the people about your wife unless it's in a public meeting. You can't do little, like, gossip about your life that's going to make you look weak. It would help if you had a group of people that help to prop up your image, and you have to give them something that's worth it, right? In exchange, and hopefully leadership and power sometimes is worth, and prestige can be worth quite a lot if you don't have a lot of money on your hands. Now, generally speaking, if you start a cult, you're either going to take over a previous cult framework, or you're going to have to come up with one of your own. Generally, you want something where police officers and military would be interested in visiting your establishment and would feel nonplussed about paying a visit and going off on their way. It needs to be so on the surface good looking, like the Masons, that you'd have the local, like, all the local gentry would be coming to your establishment. A fine selection of the humanity. Because as long as you have a certain amount of connections with the businessmen and the policemen in town, it's pretty good for you. And so you always want to think of how evil cults can be whilst being completely accepted by the government and the politics of the, and even ICE agents would be okay with you, right? How many cults have you heard of ICE agents going after Mormons in Salt Lake City? Anyone? You think I'm just being facetious, but seriously, you're not going to find ICE agents hunting around Salt Lake City. Why? Because when they see that little Mormon church and they see the women dressed like that and walking like that and staying in their proper place, they leave them alone. That is a church that's clearly accepted. A lot of people call it a cult. But it's clearly accepted by the United States government and the entire country. So you just have to come up with something that ICE agents would preferentially not get you because of how you and your people are acting, and other people would be comfortable visiting. Now you have to come up, you're probably going to either take over or come up with the thing that you got to do here, though, okay? And that is, you're either going to take over a program. Usually if you're taking one over, you're just going to keep the program going. You're going to come up with little things you can do with it, right? But you're not going to change anything right away. What if you're starting a cult? Okay? Then you need to come up with something, but what you would do is you'd go look at all the systems out there and you'd say, what do they do? Okay, the demonologists have a real racket. You cast a demon out of someone, If they don't get their shit together, by the time you come back through town in a year, they're 7 times worse off, and then you can just pray for them again. And you can keep doing this indefinitely. Because when you give them a miracle healing, they will actually feel something. People will actually have when I say miracle healings, I know you guys are thinking of the guy in the wheelchair who walked, although that does happen. But that doesn't mean that when he got up and tried to walk the next day that he didn't fall on his ass, because that also happens. So, because when you have that many people, there's a guy who wrote a book who goes to these mystic meetings that I go to, and he said that when his wife was dying, she was given this really short time to live. She couldn't hold anything down. She was doing horribly. And he realized that when he was staring at her, she would actually do better. Like to the point where she lived like an extra 8 months and didn't barely throw up or something, some crazy length of time more. But he said that he got like less than 60 hours of sleep the whole time, because if he would nod off, he would wake up to her violently throwing up and having the most horrible symptoms you could imagine. So he basically went sleepless. So when you think that people being watched by a crowd who have goodwill for them can't make them walk in the moment, it can. It can for some people. Some people are so fucking encouraged that they will walk. They'll somehow get out there. Now, people call that a miracle. The problem is if they fall back, then say like you, okay, here's another more common example that you'll see on YouTube a lot, because you guys probably aren't into evangelistic stuff too much. Aaron Doherty, not to be confused with Jeffrey Doherty, although they have similar hair color, skin color, kind of like Scandinavian looks. Now, if you go see the other Doherty, his name's Aaron Doherty, he's not Christian. He's one of the people who talks a lot of therapy with you and stuff, but not in a too horrible way, where he kind of like keeps his Viking hair and like talks to you like this is common sense or whatever. But then he also, I think he's done TED Talks and other stuff. Like he gets involved in stuff where he has groups of people and he'll pull one stage and talk to them like Teal Swan does, talk to them about their stuff, and he'll put it on his show like this woman had a miracle breakthrough in her relationships, or kind of like that kind of stuff. That is the same kind of healing truth. It is the same thing. It is the same thing to me. Now, before any further, I should tell you that in sociology class, they teach you that even AA and NA are considered benign cults. So the government only gets worried if you're a malignant cult. You're like poaching the lands. You're causing some problems locally. But if you're a benign cult, you're pretty much okay. So like AA, NA, the Masons, the Mormons, if you go to sociology class, they'll tell you all of them are considered sects or cults. All of them. It's just, is it benign or malignant? Because human behavior is played off of like, in sociology, it's like humans are set up a certain way, and when they get in certain environments, they behave a certain way. If the cues are there, and if the cues are there, for most people, it does help them. They're like, especially neurotypicals, to go into that neurotypical environment. They're going to be like, the things that cults utilize are natural cues that humans need for their nervous system and their emotions to adjust. So, because society doesn't give it anymore, right? Because if you were in a tribe, your tribe would supply all the things you're getting at church. Do you think if we were still a tribal people, that you would still go to church? No. Probably not. Maybe you'd have a group of different tribes. You'd meet together as a tribe, and then maybe like seasonally you'd go to certain areas for a solstice or a moon thing or something, or the winter or the harvest or whatever, and you'd meet with other nearby clans and do some celebrations. But like, no, generally speaking, like you're going to be meeting weekly with your own group. And so there's clan meetings and special stuff, but like you're all the time with that group of people. And so humans need that. We've evolved to need those tribal things that you would get all the time, right? And so when you're in a city, you don't get it. And so the only place in town you can pick it up, unless you have a really strong family, the only place in town you can go and get instant acceptance, instant family, is the local cult. A benign cult, preferably, right? So like maybe you go to AA or NA, or even what if you go to CODA, or you could go to Al-Anon or something like that, right? Immediately you have friends. Day one. You can get a sponsor in a week. So they still have the ways for you to get your tribal feedback, but it's like within the benign cult network when you're in a city. So if you're creating like some sort of self-fulfilling income, you want something where, like, sort of like a drug dealer, you give them something and they're going to come back and they're always going to want more. But you can have it be something like an AA or NA that people get so addicted to the cookies and kumbaya and the fellowship that they're just rushing back over and over and over again. Right? Like, there's people who go every day of the week. If you want to avoid getting in trouble with the law, you would be smart to take a pre-existing cult that's considered benign already and become an understudy, go to their little courses if they have them, and then just make sure that they accept your gender and preferences enough for you to handle. And then just go and become a cult leader of a previously existing cult. It just depends on what your goals are. I mean, like, what are you going to try to do here? You know? Because if you try to poach the land side, they'll know you're doing it, and sometimes they'll even let you save up a hoard for a minute just to make a scene out of you. But don't think it ain't going to catch up to you and that they're not, like, charging you 10 times back in interest and usury for everything that you're poaching. Because they consider if you're not on their board legitimately. See, this is my theory. The reason why CPS and stuff, like, every once in a while, okay, if someone like Diddy or Epstein is in trouble, it is not because they're the worst of the offenders in their circle. Everybody knows that those circles run on blackmail, right? So they didn't do the worst stuff. That's not what would get you cast down from the towers and made a public spectacle of. What would do that is business dealings with other people that compromise what you're doing. Let me give you an example. Gaddafi. He was in the good graces of everybody. He was fine. No, people didn't hate him. But he thought he would create his own currency. And when he thought he was going to create his own currency, that's when they said, now you're poaching. And the next thing you know, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and a group of men that had been, I think maybe they had been even his followers before. I don't even know who they were they hired. And then they were like, they brutalized him and chopped his dick off and put it down his throat and did things to this man's body. And that's what happened to Gaddafi by his friends hired people to do that to him because he thought he was going to make his own money. He didn't get outed because he did some crime. He got outed because he was trying to do his own business shit. If you want to see why Epstein or Diddy got in trouble, you should go look at who they've been doing business with, who got fucking fed up with them. Or maybe they tried to feed someone rat. I don't know. You see what I'm saying? And so then to the public it looks like, oh, we got a bad guy finally. But from the inner circle, they're knowing that everybody on the inner circle is like, oh shit, that guy tried to make some business deals outside the way we're allowed to, and like, oh, well, right? I'm just saying that because I'm going to continue from there to say more obnoxious things. I was watching a guy on YouTube today explaining something, and I wish I could remember what his name is, but he was saying that people are attracted to the most sadistic person as a leader. When you're looking for a leader, you're looking for sadism. When you're looking at someone like more diplomatic, you're looking at an analyst. Those are analysts. They're more diplomatic. They try to be fair, ethical in the way that most people would think of it. You want to hire someone ethical, go hire them as an analyst. Because people follow the sadist. Now, I'll give you an example. I've known many people, or watched and observed different people begging on the streets. And just today I heard someone saying, like, some of these hobos make more money than the people they take the money from. And I was like thinking of this guy who I know, who would sit down in Palm Springs. Not only was he a Vietnam vet, he would hang out with this other guy who wrote, like, who was a famous songwriter. And he had an apartment. Both of them had homes. There was no homeless situation. This guy was not poor, but by living nor by his friendships. But he would go out on the corner, and he would pick certain people, and he would give them this whole sob story about Vietnam, and it was all a full-blown lie. And he would tell me, he'd say, you know how much I just collected in 1 hour? He would pick on specific tourists, and he could give them a spiel, and he would make more money. The guy could scam, all right? Now, let me tell you another story. I went out there one time while I was a real estate agent, and I didn't need any money, but I was curious because I had been watching the homeless, because I separate the homeless from the hobos. Hobos are grifty as fuck. They secretly think they're the Lord God himself or the head of a cult worse than anything you've ever seen, and that's why they're hobos. And so, I kid you not, hobos come up with they secretly think shit about themselves as they walk by. Like, they'll say shit too. Hobos are grifty. A hobo will say, I want $100, and it'll blow down the street into their hand, and they'll be like, and go play poker. These hobos are a trip, man. But a homeless person, and they know the squatting laws and the legal laws, and they know how to get money from welfare like it's nobody's business. Hobos will put pictures on their Facebook where they're sitting at a pool with piles of weed and chocolate, fucking THC stuff and like umbrellas over their head. Don't underestimate the hobo. He may fall asleep on the curb sometimes, I've heard, in some situations. Not all of them do. Some of them never do that. Some of them do. But so now we're on another topic. Usually they find a way to illegally squat at a house where they can't get in trouble. So, moving on. Homeless people are people who are not good at lying. They hit some juncture in their life where they could have told some simple lie and gotten a lot of money or done whatever, and they're just not good at lying. And so they end up out there on the streets. They're not good liars. They're not good at grifting. A homeless person can stand. This is why I tested the theory of begging for money. I went out there and tried to beg in front of Walmart. I got $1 and I gave it back to the guy. As soon as I got the money, I was like, look, I don't actually need it. You can have it back. And I may have even given him a piece of candy, so he may have even gotten a bonus. But I was like, I didn't actually need it. I just wanted to see what would happen. Because I've been watching these homeless people and they have not been getting any money. I've been watching them, and that's how I know they're homeless, because they're not getting any money. They could have a baby in their arms, crying and a man trying to drag them off into a van somewhere, and the people be like, you're homeless. We didn't see nothing. A hobo? Oh, people love a fucking hobo. You ever heard, who is it? The Matrix guy? There's articles about him going off to go talk to hobos and stuff like that, and wandering the streets talking to hobos in the middle of the night. The guy who played in the Matrix, you know what I'm talking about. Because hobos are a trip. They're if you want the most grandiose of civilization, they're in the upper echelon. They just don't have money. Well, they do have money, but they don't have any that you can tax them for. Much that they're pretty low on the taxation scale. And so, yep. Where was I going with that? oh, the people are giving monies to hobos and they don't give it to homeless because the hobo is sadistic. Hobos usually have a streak of sadism. So people recognize a natural leader, and the minute that the hobo's willing to take money, they're like, here, take it. Take it. But just like Charles Manson, he says this in his interviews. He's like, I have let millions of dollars slip through my hands, $1 million 3 times. He said that like in 1980. That's when $1 million was worth like a lot more. So some people, they can't, the money, like they might have it, but it just rolls through. You know what I'm saying? Like Charles Manson wrote a Beach Boys song. He Eric Clapton bought him a motorcycle. Like he was, you know, they say that he would write more songs than even they were astounded because he could come up with a new song every few seconds that could have been a hit on the radio. Like they said he was that talented. That's what the Eric Clapton and those kind of guys said about him. Go look it up. So like, but he just wasn't into getting an accountant. And if you don't want to pay your taxes, get an accountant and be all consistent and hold on to your money and build an empire, you're gonna, if you prefer to go grift the streets and call yourself the Lord God or some cult leader of something far worse than anyone's ever seen, then you'll go be a hobo instead. Hobos are not the innocents that people make them out to be. That's all unless you count innocence as what they are. And then they're as innocent as the day is innocent. If the day is innocent. Right? So then where am I going with this? Oh. You can get people to help you in your church as analysts and shit like that, but the cult leader ultimately has to be a sadist. Now, they don't have to be a natural sadist. They just have to have a certain amount of sadism. Well, Machiavelli would say it's better to be hated than loved, but not so, feared than loved, but not so much that you're hated. And so the idea is that you're going to have to be a little bit feared. Now, how does a person in the AA scare people without getting in trouble with the law? They do social shunning, and they say things over the pulpit to each other. When they get behind have you ever noticed when it's their turn to talk, that they take swings at each other, and they say stuff like about how they stopped, smoking pot immediately, and they don't go to meetings while they're still smoking pot, or whatever it is. Like, so that's why some people go to SMART meetings, because in SMART, you can say like, I'm trying to quit pot, but this week I have still smoked, and I started to light up during this meeting and I had to put it out because I didn't realize what I was doing. And they'll be like, okay, let's work through it. We want everybody to have their most wonderful life. We're just going to work right on through it. And that's the SMART meetings. But if you want to go to AA or NA, they're going to tell you, like, they're going to jack you up in front of the crowd because they take turns with the microphone, like a pastor or a rapper. People act like it's all just fun and games. And that's the point. For the person who's the cult leader, it depends. If you're like a shadowy figure and you're looking for a black swan in a pre-existing organization, that's a completely different, that's in a different ballpark altogether. What's the difference between a cult leader and a black swan? Okay, so some black swans do occupy the same position as another person who occupies it by charisma and sadism. So the bigger they say that the bigger the light that a leader shines, the bigger light they have, the bigger their shadow, the more horrible their secret life is. So like Eminem, he's got all this light, means the shadow is what his secret life and what the business goes on behind the scenes is correspondingly that bad. Because every action has an equal and opposite reaction. You can't just like put that and that, right? So when you get a black swan, so if you already had a cult and then you wanted to install someone, you could get a black swan, but they call them a black swan for a reason. Because they're ruling differently. They have charisma, but basically you're holding the congregation hostage. These people will never be okay without you. It's a different situation. Even presidents do this, by the way. Even presidents do this. We just saw this, like, so, if the people were to make a faux pas in the first year, if it's in the face, if it's patriotic, he'd just find a way to look it over, right? So, what is all this boring talk about? Okay. I talk about this stuff a lot, but I'm going to talk about it again. The first thing I'm going to bring up is the Stanley Milgram study and the Yale baby study. In the Stanley Milgram study, over 65% of people were immediately willing to shock another person to death, albeit it was just an actor, but just from the behest of an authority figure, and I think really a quick time. In the Yale baby study, 66% of babies will switch ethical teams from being on the good guy team to the bad guy team, just to have a person like side with them and be on their team and have an in-group preference. It's over crackers. With the babies, if you like the same cracker, they don't care what you do. They tested them. And so the babies are giving the same results as the adults. That should tell you something. That they're changing. Here's another one. Andrew Bustamante is a CIA book author, and him and his wife wrote a book together and said that the first thing the CIA teaches them in spy school is to look for the 1 out of 5 people who is naturally, the way I like to put it is this. Okay, so he says 1 out of 5 people, you wouldn't want to know what they would do to you if they had you alone, and their image and their continuing functioning in the system was not going to be jeopardized. So if they could just get away with anything, 1 out of 5 people would do things so horrible that you would never want to know the extent that they would go to. That's what he said to CIA. That's what he says in his book, and he says it in his interviews. 1 out of 5. Do the math. If there's a mom, a dad, and 3 little kids and a granny in a house, 1 or 2 of them is that bad. Secretly out there. Who knows what they do to the cat in private? We don't know what these people are like. So they could be, we don't want to even speculate. And so that's interesting because there's something called I'm going to say it, mispronounce it, but the Pareto factor, which is the 80% producer, 20% scrounger or usurper model of economics that they found also happens in communal mammalian species. But basically, in the Yale baby study, it turns out that 80% of children babies initially prefer pro-social behavior, helper behavior, fair behavior. But like I said, 66 total will flip teams for a cracker or an in-group preference, and it doesn't change. So what they found in that study, though, is that just almost 80% of babies like pro-social behavior, but just almost 21% of babies, a little over 20%, prefer bullying, and these are not abused children. These are not abused children. As the maesters say, madness is bred in the womb. Because you're non-coding DNA and all the stuff that's selecting you out and choosing how the cards are going to lay down is like being selected while you're incubating. And so your mother's environment, her emotions, the people she's around, what she's listening to, where she lives, everything she's doing, this is adding to it, because humans are really psychic and stuff. So a baby's permeable. So you got this baby in this environment where there's like the society's brewing around them. And if animal species have this 20 to 80% paradox goes on with them a lot of times too, from what I was reading, it can go on with them, but for sure it goes on with us, then it's something that's part of our intra-species evolutionary construct, most likely. Like, it's just the exterior gears of the grandfather clock are the species that are competing against each other, like cats and dogs, but the ones that are from the same species, that's intraspecies, are competing against each other using this Pareto sort of factor, in which 20% of people don't have the anterior cingulate cortex development to feel corresponding. If you pain, they don't pain. If you like, so, but if you're exploited, they get a preferential hit of dopamine. So the way they're wired is that 20% of people are like herding dogs, and 80% are kind of like sheep. And the Yale baby study and the CIA book authors say that it upholds their life, their whole life. So think of it like herding dogs. If you had sheep loose in a field and there was like herding dogs herding them, the herding dog doesn't eat the sheep because he knows he's going to get a slice of meat. He gets fed with the shepherd. He has his place in the tribe, in his little pack, in his hierarchy. And so he doesn't have a reason to go randomly attacking sheep unless it's not going to cost him his place, his privilege, or his image, or his anything, right? So, but if he did have a random sheep that was not part of that flock and he was alone with it for some reason, there's no telling what he would do with it. That, right, exactly, like a different species. Thank you. So what you're dealing with is, they say that all disassociation is, so you have an overwhelming emotion of some sort, and then you have a hemispheric lateralization as a response. So who knows to what extent that goes on in the womb, because Professor Sam Botkins posits that narcissists already have a right to left hemispheric, not like a block in the way we think of it, like people who get their brain chopped in half kind of block, but like from a sort of like, if you were to hypothetically explain it as systems understanding, like right hemisphere is like creativity and all this like feelings and feeling compassion, and other people suffer, you suffer, and left hemisphere is like loosely like apparently normal personalities and like more getting forward at any cost, and so, and more image and story conscious. And so like a normal person has, their left hemisphere has access to their right hemisphere to get source, like a Freeman and Dune. And so with the sandworms, but like the because water in all the mythologies, springs of water in general, floods, happens when people do mass human sacrifice. That's how they would get water, is they would sacrifice people. And back in the old days, or a well would show up where they sacrificed someone or some shit like that. So like water throughout, so like the Freeman of Dune, that's why the earth has gone like hypothetically into a desert, because these like, the Big Bear natives say that there was this spirit worm and they were going into a drought because they wouldn't do human sacrifice, and that the spirit worm threatened to take full form, which would have been a physical worm, like basically that fits the description of the worms on Arrakis, which led me to the conclusion that these worms cluster in certain areas, but that they also, well, I think they cluster around fault lines is one thing, but I could be wrong. And that they're basically, their corporal form is like not really like normal looking, but they may look like humanoids, but if there's no human sacrifice and they're deprived of it, they will start to manifest like a semi-translucent worm shape. And if the sacrifices continue to be withheld, desertification spreads and they take physical form. And then you have to look for springs of water and put on like Freeman suits and shit, right? Because you're not about, your left and your right hemisphere are connected to each other. So you're not going to create water from other people because you're going to feel it, because your right hemisphere is connected to everybody else. And if you hurt someone else, it hurts you just as bad or worse if it's unnecessary, harmful, cruel behavior. And like, so you're in a situation where you just put on a Freeman suit. So if your left and your right hemisphere are connected, you're going to put a Freeman suit on. Then the worms of Arrakis will provide the spice dust, and then people use it for space travel. And that's why they say that Jacob was a worm, because he's a humanoid who had a human form, but he really was actually he's supposed to be a space worm, just a large worm roaming around the planet. And, but obviously we have not gone to Dune. So we're in a different kind of system where it's kind of like on Fringe when the humanoid, half alien, they were like, not human, they were half robot, half human. They were like crossing dimensions because their bodies could handle it. But then when they were supposed to stay on mission, but they were like falling in love with families and all these things were happening. And then they were like, the saga continues. I want to stay now. And everybody was horrified, and some of them got in trouble for it. And like, so basically, like, what happened is that the worms had been in a human form for so long that they're becoming like accustomed to it. Now, if they had a taste of turning into a 500 plus ton mega worm that breathes fire and barrels through the desert hunting for victims that you can time travel, destroy in your stomach, they'd probably just switch. They just probably say, just go back to Dune, but maybe not. Or maybe they would. I don't know. What would they do? Anyways, so it's not like there wouldn't be water on the other planets. But, the Harkonnens are still pretty horrible. The Earth might not have human sacrifice, and they get space travel, and it's the same, eternal commerce. But the problem is that there's Harkonnens are still always going to be an issue. Their watery planets are always functioning, and they're probably quite happy about that. And that's a trade-off, is they just fly off to their own planet and do horrible shit. It's like, really? Of course there's always going to be a problem. And so then what were we doing with that one? The worms, the thing. So, if your left and your right hemisphere don't connect to each other, and you don't feel corresponding unbearable suffering when someone else suffers, then what happens is, so like some people can't commit certain crimes because they would suffer because of the way their anterior cingulate cortex is developed. The amount of suffering they feel when another person suffers is too much for their nervous system. It would be like trying to pinch someone's nerve and trying to get them to fight at the same time, because they don't want to, it's not that they won't fight you, it's that they won't go after an innocent, hapless victim who has no idea what's going on, who feels like they're being made fun of. And that's the differentiating factor. And that only makes them halfway decent. And so, and that's the most you're ever going to get. But basically, so 20% of babies are, all the way through their whole life, are essentially herding dogs, or quasi, you can say for the hyperbole, you'd say worms, like the worms of Arrakis, just still in a humanoid sort of form. And then, in this particular dimensional plane. And then, anyways, back to the cult, because, Muad'Dib is a great example of a cult leader in Dune, too. He's a cult leader. Sure. Absolutely. And then, it's just, so, okay. How to keep your cult. Well, there's a few things, like the malignant versus the benign. So, say that you're talking about a person who claims to be from the adjuncting wizarding community out of Babylon that many people refer to as something that sounds a lot like juice, okay? Now, if you were from one of those groups, but it was the Reform sect, you'd probably be in a benign cult, and very few people would have anything to do or know anything about what you were involved in. Or if you're a Catholic and you go to church only a couple times a year, same situation. You probably you're not involved with, nor do you have and if you go to the local Masonic lodge, you probably are not involved in this crazy shady undertakings. No, you're probably eating coleslaw and fruit salad and I don't know what else you're doing. It's something else. And so the thing is that I don't know where I came up with coleslaw and salad, but that just came out of nowhere. It's summer, these are cold dishes, maybe that's why. Without a vision, the people perish. So if you want to keep people around, you have to give them a vision. Now, as you can tell, I'm not like the person to go to for that right now. Like, if you want a vision, Jeffrey Doherty will give you a vision. He'll try to give you a vision when he talks. Teal Swan will create a vision when she talks. A lot of people can create a vision when they talk that makes other people want to join in. You know, but if the trumpet gives an uncertain sound, the people don't assemble. And the thing is, if you do not have a vision that makes your people special, now you have to be careful, okay, that they're not so special that they bring the government cracking down on them, like we talked about earlier. They can be just special enough, like recovery addicts, just special enough. Not too special. You have to allow them to be special, but then you have to allow them to take pride in being not too special as well. So like, meaning like you have to give them a way to be proud of what they're doing already and the things they're already proficient at, just that they're doing it with you now, and that it's the greatest. And then you have to feel comfortable with not going all the way. Like, so if they're like a grocery clerk or they're the local police department guy, you have to be comfortable with making them feel comfortable with being not that special. Meaning, like, you don't want them to get on a plane to Israel and be the tourist bus that lands at the local hospital all under Jerusalem syndrome thinking they're Moses and having a fight, right? About who gets to wear the beard. And so you don't want them to think they're so special. Like, you want them to be proud of their humble origins. Like, I come from a police officer family, or I, you know, I'm the local grocer, or the bus person, or whatever. Like, you want them to feel like their regular job is every bit as a hero mission as whatever the big guys do. And you have to make it easy. You have to give them an offer they can't refuse. You have to think of things that they would do, basically like, that they would want to do anyways, so the incentive is so high that it's like putting someone on a diet that's like it would be just like easy, and you're gonna come up with it for whatever it is. It's not really a diet, but like, it is kind of like that. Then it's like, why do cults not, like, what happens in a malignant cult? A malignant cult, there's a few things. One is they do not allow reporting to the outside. So like, if you're in like AA or NA and the person that's running the meeting like sexually harasses you, the first thing they're going to tell you is let's call the police right now. Like, they're not going to tell you that if you come bring this situation that happened before the police, that you're going to be blackballed and exiled from the AANA community. Right? But so in a malignant cult, the people have your family, your children, your wife, your kids, everybody, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, they have them all held hostage. And if you report on someone, they will take away your business, they will take away your money, they will take away your children, and you'll be left like a fucking stooge in the middle of the desert, roaming the backcountry like a wild coyote. These things happen. That's life in the big city, kid. They like, if you're in a malignant cult, there's a different situation. So whenever you see like a pedophile bust on TV, like they found this guy or this lady and they had 16 grandchildren and blah blah blah, it was really horrible. And then everybody in the newspaper article, the local like people at the Dollar Tree, the local church, the charities are all saying like, we saw these people like on the regular. We even saw their kids sometimes. It turned out their 18-year-old daughter had been raised in like a 10-foot by 10-foot or 12-foot by 12-foot room with like 16 other kids, and she couldn't spell her name. They had brought her into public, and the public had seen her and just thought she was a cute, shy girl like her mother that whispered a lot. Literally, when they got busted, right? So, why do you think they got busted? Same thing. Rats. They were feeding someone rats. That was their like in their circle, and then they were trying to make business deals like Gaddafi. Rats and trying to do their own currency. On some level, they were trying to there's a group of people who know you're going to try to undercut certain groups of people, but they're like, you don't do that with us though. And then you try to do it with them. So why did those people get busted when a lot of other people don't? And why did it take 2 years? Probably they pissed somebody off in a business deal. They were probably trafficking all 16 of those kids. And then they did something like that Queen of Targaryen, they fed someone who was their equal or their better rat to try to teach them a lesson. And like they went and took their goods, or they tried to do a business deal behind their back that cut them out of it, and they were like, well, that's a lack of fidelity. Here you go. Don't think they got busted because they were doing something bad and society just thought it was wrong. Because there's people who go their whole lives and their parents never get busted.